Today's video is sponsored by Saley. That's why you're getting an extra video today. More on that in a bit. I found myself in Poplar last week for reasons totally unrelated to this video, and while I was there I thought, why not talk about Blackwall Station? Why not indeed? Blackwall Station is a stop on the Docklands Light Railway branch to Beckton. But there's more to it than that. You see, this is not the first Blackwall Station. It's not the first station on this site. But the first Blackwall Station and the first station on this site are not the same thing. What kind of flim-flam argle-bargle is this? Well, let me explain. Now, as I have said before, the main reason the DLR got the go-ahead in the 80s was because it was cheap. For much of its route it could reuse existing track alignment, which meant that all the heavy engineering and demolition of houses and such like had already been done by some Victorian, and all the DLR chaps had to do was build a light railway over the pathways their predecessors had carved. Between Tower Gateway and West Ferry, the line runs along the viaduct built by the London and Blackwall Railway. The London and Blackwall is one of my favourite railways, and it's fascinated me ever since I found a book about it in a second-hand bookshop about 25 years ago. This was the first railway into the London Docklands and one of London's early commuter lines. It opened in 1840 and was originally known as the Commercial Railway. It was laid to an unusual gauge of 5 feet and half an inch, and the trains were hauled by cable rather than locomotives. After West Ferry, the line continued approximately along the route of the DLR viaduct as far as the present-day Blackwall Station. After that, it veered off towards the river. It terminated approximately here, where these blocks of flats are, near the Virginia Monument. This was where the first settlers departed for Virginia. By gum, that's inspiring stuff. Kinda makes you want to go on your own voyage, doesn't it? And if you're doing that, you need Saley, who sponsored today's video. Saley is an eSIM card. Let me explain. If you've ever travelled abroad, you've probably experienced the horror of either relying on public Wi-Fi or racking up horrendous charges. What are your options? Don't use the internet? Talk sense, man. You'll be stuck listening to John Smith's boring stories for 6 weeks. What else? Mess around buying a new physical SIM card for every country you visit? Who has the time? Not me, I've got a gold rush to get to. Saley is an eSIM, which is like a virtual SIM card. What you do is this. You download the app. Saley works on any phone that supports eSIM technology, whether iOS or Android. Then you buy a plan. Multiple plans in over 200 destinations are available at some of the best rates around. If you're planning to do a lot of travelling, regional or global plans are available. Then you install the eSIM thusly. As soon as you land at your destination, it'll automatically connect to the local network. The fine folk at Saley have even got a special offer for shipmates of this channel. You can get an exclusive 15% discount on Saley eSIM data plans. Download the Saley app and use the code JAGO at checkout, or use this QR code, or visit the link in the description below, as you please. Now there's nothing stopping you from stepping aboard and filling your lungs with sea air. Well, nothing except the rest of this video. I suppose I should finish talking about the London and Blackwall Railway's terminus. Now that first terminus was named Blackwall. I mean, the clue is in the railway's name. Here there was a steamer pier where the trains met the boats. But anyway, this means that obviously the present-day Blackwall Station is not the same one, and here things get confusing. The closest present-day station to the old Blackwall is East India, which obviously is not in East India. It's named after the East India Docks. The London and Blackwall Railway did have a station by the site of the present-day Blackwall Station, but it was called Poplar. The present-day Poplar Station is approximately where the Blackwall Railway's Millwall Junction was, and Millwall Junction was not in Millwall. It was just called that because you could get to Millwall from there. If you want to get more confusing, of course you do, the London and Blackwall Poplar Station that opened in 1840 was in a slightly different spot just across the road, but was rebuilt in 1845. The road it was just across no longer exists. Would you like to be even more confused? There was also a Poplar station on the North London Railway, which was where All Saints is on the DLR. I feel like maybe I should just do a video on all the different poplars. I don't know how well that would do in viewing terms, it might be very unpopular indeed. Regardless, on top of all that, this entire area has been completely rebuilt since the days of the Blackwall line. There are very few signs of the old poplar round here, much less the old Poplar station. Even some of the old docks have been filled in. Which is unfortunate because when Poplar Dock first opened in 1851 it was the world's first railway dock. Bizarrely, while the London and Blackwall Railway served the Docklands, it was strictly passenger-only in its early days. It was perfectly situated to take advantage of the enormous quantities of goods entering and leaving London every day, but the fact that it was cable-hauled meant that things like sidings and marshalling yards simply weren't practical. In 1849 it gained a connection to the Eastern Counties Railway, and the directors decided it was time to join the rail network properly, converting the track to standard gauge and adopting locomotive haulage. But by this time another company already had their eye on the prize. The East and West India Docks and Birmingham Junction Railway built their own docks here. That company, which fortunately for my voice was later renamed the North London Railway, provided a connection with several other railway companies around London. Soon those other companies would come to serve this area with their own wharves and warehouses. The London and North Western, the Great Western, the Great Northern, and the ones who built this. This is a hydraulic pump house. It was built by the Midland Railway in 1882 for their own dock, which they'd built after getting sick of sharing with the other railways. The Midland Railway built St Pancras Station, and compare the buildings around there with this and I think you can see the similarities. Before electricity, the docks were powered by hydraulics. The way it worked was rather clever. In this building you'd have a steam engine which would pump water up the tower there, which is known as an accumulator tower, and there's a few of them around the docks. Now, I'm going to have to simplify here because I ain't no physicist, but the water in the tower is, like David Bowie, under pressure, as a result of gravity. And that pressure is what provides the power. You'd have water mains running from the accumulator tower to the cranes, capstans, hoists, and whatever else you needed powered. Also in the accumulator tower you'd have a great big piston connected to the steam engine's regulator. So if the pressure in the tower dropped, the piston would open the regulator and the engine would step its output up. And this meant that no matter how hard the docks were working, you would have a consistent level of power. There was a company, the London Hydraulic Power Company, that provided power for the city in much the same way that gas and electric companies do now. But the railways preferred to keep it in-house, probably because they had all the relevant engineers already. Eventually electricity would come along and render the comparatively cumbersome hydraulic system redundant. Fortunately, these big buildings often found other uses, which is how they survive to this day. The story of what happened to the railway docks is the same story as the rest of the London docks. The advent of containerisation meant that these docks were inadequate. Despite them getting a rebuild in the 1960s, they just couldn't compete with Tilbury downriver. And in 1981 they closed. The Midland Basin was filled in, which brings me back to the London and Blackwall's Poplar Station. As it turned out, it was a jolly good thing that the railway had diversified into goods traffic, because by the early 20th century not a lot of passengers wanted to take the train. The buses and trams were cheaper and more convenient. In 1926 the line was closed to passengers. Only goods wagons and the very occasional enthusiasts special would use the station now. Most of the buildings here, which had only been made of timber in the first place, were demolished. The remains went in the 60s with the rebuilding of the docks. In 1977 the track was ripped up, and in 1981 the railway's earthworks were filled in. Now, while I said that Blackwall is where Poplar used to be, that's not strictly correct. It would be more correct to say that the site of the old Poplar is under Aspen Way, the road you see here. With the loss of the docks, the question arose of what to do with all this space. Now, this was very much the age of the car, so initially the redevelopment of the docks was to centre on roads. There was a reluctance in government to invest in rail, not that we'd know anything about that today, of course. But roads have their limits in an urban environment, and the actual residents of the area were calling for public transport. The London Docklands Development Corporation, the quango in charge of the whole Docklands shebang, agreed. The Docklands Light Railway was a compromise, a low-budget railway. Initially there were 3 branches. One followed the old London and Blackwall Railway from Tower Gateway to Poplar. The new Poplar, that is. Another ran from Poplar to Stratford over the former North London Railway. And the third ran from Poplar to Island Gardens, following the route of the Millwall Extension Railway. The system opened in 1987. But even before the system had started running, London Regional Transport applied to Parliament for permission to build an extension to Beckton. The biggest of the abandoned docks in London were the Royal Docks, and there were equally big plans in place. Most obviously, an airport. LRT were optimistic enough that they built their junction at Poplar with space and track layout to allow the Beckton branch to be popped in whenever Parliament granted them permission. Permission was granted. Initially there was some scepticism over how much the line would actually be used, and 2 of the planned stations, at Connaught and Thames Wharf, were dropped from the plan. But despite this, the extension does appear to have been built future-proofed against increases in traffic. For instance, the platforms at Poplar were lengthened to allow longer trains. And while the viaducts around Canary Wharf were steel and concrete, those on the Beckton extension were entirely concrete. More expensive, but better for long-term heavy traffic. One of the arguments for light rail, rather than, say, a tube line, was that there wouldn't be enough passengers to justify anything more substantial. Developments such as Canary Wharf quickly pushed the system to its limit, and by the 1990s it was clear that both the planned line and its stations would need to be beefed up. Blackwall, which opened in 1994, is an example of this. It has long platforms protected by canopies. Unlike most rail systems in London, the DLR is fully accessible. The station receives up to 16 trains per hour in each direction at peak times, which is certainly not light traffic. It is the closest station to Poplar High Street, and serves new developments that are popping up around here. It seems that when it comes to building a station here, the third time really is the charm. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do consider leaving a like and perhaps subscribing for more. I would like, as always, to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your kind support. You are the concrete to my viaduct. Thanks also to Saley for sponsoring today's video. Check out the link in the description below to take advantage of their rather splendid offer. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.